Hello, friends. Welcome to the Truth to You Daily Podcast with Brother Scott. We are thrilled that you have taken time out of your day to explore with us God's timeless truth. Regardless of who we are, we all need the light of God's Word to illuminate our path for this day. And now, here is our youth pastor, Brother Scott.
Hello, welcome back to the Truth to You podcast. It's Monday, November the 14th, and because it's Monday, we have Miss Christina here with us in the studio. Great to see you today, babe.
Hello, it's great to be here. Hopefully I'm not too loud or too soft.
Yep, we're dealing with our mic issues as usual, but nonetheless,
like Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Yep, just bear.
Too big, too small, just right.
Just
Hopefully
bear with us.
Third time's the charm.
Yeah, indeed. Okay. Well, let's get started here with our memory verse. It's First Samuel 12, verse 24. Only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider how great things he hath done for you. 1 Samuel 12, 24. One more time. Only fear the Lord and serve him in truth with all your heart, for consider how great things he hath done for you. I don't know how many of our listeners have a life verse, but that's a pretty good one right there.
Yeah,
that's sort of
an excellent verse.
Covers many things.
A lot of things.
Okay, we are introducing today 1 Samuel. So we're into a new book. If you've been joining us from the beginning, you were with us through Proverbs, and then we went to a New Testament passage. Went to John, the Gospel of John, and now we're back to the Old Testament. Going to be looking some of the historical books here in the Old Testament and looking at 1 Samuel. So this is going to be an overview. We're just going to talk big picture stuff here, give you a little bit of an outline that sort of classifies this book. But as we get into it, let me just go ahead and lay a little bit of a foundation, and then we'll talk about this outline just a bit. But Israel's not really heard from God in a while. If you go back in your mind, we just got done with, or I say we, or the way the Bible is laid out, Joshua, which is a book of victory, and then Judges, which happens to be a book of defeat. And that's really where God's people are been. They're in a defeated position spiritually. And so, there's not a lot of people doing right. The priests are not doing right. The people are not doing right. The nearby nations are starting to threaten land security. And as we get into this book, it really marks a defining change of direction. It's sort of gradual. It doesn't just hit the ground running that way, because there are some defeats that are suffered at the beginning of this book that we'll be talking about, but it really does signify a change of direction, an important point in Israel's history. Let's go ahead, and I'm not going to say a whole lot more because I want to start talking about this outline just a bit. So let's set this up. In 1 Samuel chapter 1 through 7, we do a lot of reading about Samuel, who was used of God as a prophet and a judge. But I wonder today, as we kind of just freestyle this, I wonder, as we think about Samuel, what's something that comes to your mind when you think about him?
So Samuel was obviously brought to the temple as a very young child, and he worked there basically with Eli. And so you could think of somebody in a realm who grew up in a very Christian environment. Mm-hmm. And I just think of Samuel as somebody who he grew up around the truth, knowing what the right was. And he stayed with that, and he became a prophet and a judge. And so he followed the Lord for a very long time, from a very young child.
Yeah. Yeah. When I think about Samuel, I think about somebody who sort of had to grow up kind of fast. He didn't really live with his parents long.
Right. Yeah.
And then, he's really has to lean on the Lord from a very young age because of his, he's living in the temple. That wouldn't have been normal.
Yeah,
there's not many
situation.
Yeah, there's not many kids who have been just given to the Lord in that way, and now they're living in the temple and working with the priest who was Eli. So you can imagine this was a difficult situation for him. And then even thinking about the people that he would have been around. For Samuel, he's sort of a stabilizing force throughout the first and second Samuel. There's a lot of things happening, but there's a constant there, and that is Samuel.
Yeah, he's always faithful and steady. You could always count on him to tell you the right thing and to have listened to God and said the right thing.
And in contrast to Samuel and who he was, of course, Eli had a couple of sons who were corrupt.
Right. And Samuel could have been influenced by those as a young child, a teenager, whatever, but he really did lean on the Lord, and I feel like probably leaned on Eli as a mentor to him, as a parent figure almost.
Yeah.
He didn't become like Eli's sons. He did what was right.
Yeah, right. And can you imagine? Because I think it was well known to Eli. Eli knew certainly the conduct of his sons. I think other people knew it. It was probably, I don't know how well known it was, but I think Samuel would have seen and known, and that's got to be tough. I mean, growing up in a situation where you're seeing somebody who should be doing right, but they're not.
Right, and he could have even seen it as a double standard, like, wait, these are Eli's sons? And even maybe question Eli, like, why should I listen to you? Look what your sons are doing.
Yeah.
Yet he realized, no, Eli is actually doing what's right. He's following the Lord. No, it didn't make what his sons were doing right, but he didn't let that deter him.
No.
You're not doing right, so therefore I'm not going to listen to anything you have to say.
Yeah. Yeah, and when I think of Samuel, the other thing that I think of is I think about the statement that is said of his words, that the Lord didn't let any of his words fall to the ground. I think that's such a cool statement there. And we actually, that is a devotional that is coming up. In fact, it's tomorrow. So you'll read and hear a little bit more about that tomorrow. But anyway, so 1 Samuel 1, chapter 1 through chapter 7, you really get your bearings on Samuel, Eli, things that were happening around that time. But like you said, the faithfulness of Samuel can be clearly seen there. Let's go on to 1 Samuel chapter 8, chapters 8 through 15. This is where things really get interesting for Israel.
Yes.
Because they don't want a king, and they do want a king, but Samuel's trying to tell them, look, you don't want a king.
Right.
But they press him, and then the Lord gives them a king, out of the hardness of their heart, and that king turns out to be
Saul, who pretty much in the end was a big disaster.
Yeah.
Probably an embarrassment to the country that all these problems are going on.
It sounds like a good heading in your body, the disaster of Saul.
Yes, pretty much. But he started out so good, and he did look so promising, and so everybody did have their faith and trust in him. Oh, he can lead us, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, that is so true. You talk about a guy who looked the part.
Right. You thought he would be a success.
Yeah.
Maybe he was really popular already.
For all of his physical characteristics that he had, the externals, the outward things that, so many times we flock to, right? We go, that just looks like a leader.
Right.
But sometimes people can have all the externals, but lack the most important things.
Right.
Those internal qualities that are essential, for leading people or simply for following the Lord.
Right. Doing right.
So like you said, Saul was a big disappointment in the history books as far as Israel goes. He seems like he's got some positive beginnings, and then things just really begin to unravel. And why is that? What do you think, if you could pinpoint Saul's underlying sin that just seemed to stick with him and sort of have an effect on his downfall?
Turned out, I guess in my mind, biggest thing is his pride and selfishness, which are kind of basically the same thing, but in his pride it was like, oh wow, I am pretty great. They like me as their king. Okay, I'm just going to take over. He then thought of himself more important than what God told him to do when he was supposed to go kill all the people and whatever, and he didn't exactly obey God because, I think I know better.
Yeah.
He had the I know better attitude. And then when David came on the scene, then he became jealous, which is also just another root issue of pride. Like, oh wow, here's somebody else doing great things, instead of celebrating, oh wow, they can do some great things and like helping them, encouraging them. It's like, wait, you can't do that. People are going to like you better than me. And just becomes this jealousy thing where he slowly basically just falls apart himself.
Yeah.
His pride makes him...
Right. You're kind of getting into the latter portions there of the book, but that's okay. But before we get there, let's talk about perhaps the most influential figure in 1 Samuel, and that is found in 1 Samuel 16 through 20. You see God raising up a young boy by the name of David, and David would become king of Israel. What comes to your mind when you think of David?
Well, there's a lot. I think there's just so much of his life given to us, which is, I think, neat, because you get to see a lot into his heart and motive behind everything.
Yeah.
I think of David as somebody who is bold and who wasn't afraid to stand up for what was right. But going back, I guess, in his younger days, he did what he was supposed to do, no matter how small the job. He was supposed to be watching sheep. He did that faithfully. Yeah. He wasn't looking to be like, well, let me go do this. What? I don't like this job. Give me something bigger and better. And he didn't have to be in public doing great things. No, he did what was right behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And much later in his life, you know, he knew he was going to become king, yet he had to wait a long time before that actually took place.
Yeah, that's what I think of, the waiting. David, when I think of David, I so often go to, he waited well.
Yeah, he was very patient. He didn't run in front of the Lord like, hey, I'm supposed to be king. God even said, you know, get with it, people, make me king.
Yes.
And I think that shows the contrast between his humility and then the pride of Saul. David was willing to wait and wait on God's timing. He didn't think he knew better than the Lord. Where Saul was very much like, look at me, I'm going to do what I want. Just complete opposites.
Yeah, and those worlds collide, right? And that's found in the latter portions of 1 Samuel. 1 Samuel 21 then through chapter 31, it really, Saul he's hunting David, and he's just encapsulated by his pride and deep jealousy.
Yeah. And
so there's a lot of interesting interactions that take place between these two.
And I feel like it just seems, sometimes I think of Saul and I'm like, it's so odd, because it was like he would go try to fight him, he wouldn't actually kill him, then he'd feel sorry for it, and then he would just go right back at it. Like, Saul was just so unstable and erratic. And I think we talked about this last week. Basically, what the sin in our own heart, how low it will bring us. Yeah. And Saul never envisioned from his first day as king to then now he's supposed to be king next. No, I'm going to go kill him off. Yeah. He never envisioned how low he would go. But sin will bring us low, and it will make us do embarrassing things, basically.
Yeah. So, you know, our pride will bring us down for sure. We have the opportunity either to humble ourselves or for God to humble us.
Right.
And it is so much easier when we take the first way. And that is, I'm just going to humble myself. And how could Saul have done that? Well, he could have said, I'm wrong. I never should have taken this stuff. I never should have taken it to myself. I should have done as the Lord said. I apologize. I'm sorry. That's not going to happen again. Or even when things were at their worst, where Samuel's basically saying, look, kingdom is being taken from your hand. You are done. That's not easy to hear. But if you want to be right, and if you want to have any future whatsoever in regards to, you know, the Lord blessing your life, at that moment, you know, Saul says, I'm sorry. I understand. I've blown it. I'm going to lose my position, and I understand I deserve that. You know, God's will be done. But he doesn't do that, and so he's hurting Israel. He's hurting David. Yeah. And he's hurting himself.
Right.
And his whole family. So, I mean, in an attempt to preserve, he's actually destroying himself.
Right. It's like he's grasping at straws to, well, this is mine. No, I'm supposed to have control of this. Yeah. Yeah. But he's really losing it all and making it worse.
Yeah, it's an it's almost hard to watch because you know what's coming.
Right.
You know, and it's like those movies I used to watch when I was a kid, and hope that the second time I watched it would be a different ending.
Yes.
But that's not reality,
Right.
and unfortunately, that's not what we have available to us in the record of 1 Samuel. So some great things coming, and I'm asking the Lord to just open His Word to me, 1 Samuel to me as I read it. And so I encourage our listeners to take time today and ask the Lord to reveal Himself to you through the stories and the situations that we find in the book of 1 Samuel. Okay? All right, well, thanks for being with us today.
Yes.
Sort of enjoyed this. Was a little bit different podcast as we kind of took a flyover.
I was going to say, very quick trip through the
Yep,
whole book.
it was. We got in our airplane and we finished the book in about
That's
15
dope.
minutes, so that's not
Good
bad.
job.
Okay, thanks for joining us today. We hope that you'll come back tomorrow, and don't forget, be praying for Ethan today. Ethan is our teenager of the day. We appreciate him. We send out our love and our prayers to him, and let's all be asking the Lord to give him wisdom and to bless his life. All right, we'll see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Take care.